All right, this is going to be a really short lesson overview, but a fairly long lesson because we're just going to go over the rules for capitalization, of which there are a lot. And then we're going to do a little bit of practice, and you'll see if you can find the places that should be capitalized in a piece of text. All right, so here are the rules for capitalization. Here are the words you capitalize. First, capitalize the first word of a sentence and the first word of a quoted sentence. So, for example, in the sentence, "Look out," you capitalize the L. In a quoted sentence, "He shouted, look out," you capitalize both the H in he because it's the first letter of your sentence, and the L in look because it's the first letter of your quoted sentence. Not too hard. You also capitalize proper nouns, as you would have found in our lesson on proper nouns in the basic grammar course. So when we're talking about London Bridge, there's only one London Bridge in all the world, so you capitalize L and B in London Bridge. You also capitalize a person's title when it precedes the name, when it comes before that person's name, but not when it acts as a description following the name. So when let's say we're talking about a physician whose name happens to be John Smith. Well, if you write Dr. John Smith, you capitalize the D in doctor. You also abbreviate it, usually. But if you're just talking about him and you mention that he's a physician, you would just say John Smith, a doctor, and you don't capitalize the D in doctor because it's not his title in front of his name. Next, you capitalize a title when it appears after a name in an address or a signature line. So if he is signing a letter, John Smith, Doctor, then you capitalize the D, but that's a fairly limited use. Next, you capitalize the titles of high-ranking government officials when used with or before their names. Don't capitalize the civil title if it is used instead of the name. So when we say the president will address Congress, Congress is the official name of the body. It has its own special rules. But when we're just talking about the president, you don't capitalize the P in president because you're only talking about the office. If, however, you're using it as a title in front of someone's name, President Roosevelt will address Congress, then you capitalize the P in president as well as the R in Roosevelt because it's his last name. It's a proper noun. Next, capitalize any title when used as a direct address or in place of a name. So if we say, "Come with me, doctor," then you capitalize the D in doctor because you're using it instead of his name. You're talking to him and saying, "Hey, doctor." You would capitalize his name if you used it, so you capitalize his title under those circumstances. Next, capitalize points of the compass, north, south, east, and west, only when they refer to specific regions. So, for example, my wife was raised in the American South. Well, the American South has a very specific meaning. It's a set of states in the southeastern portion of the United States. If someone is from the American South, you know that they have to be from Georgia or Mississippi or a few other states. So it's a very specific region, so in that case, you capitalize the S in South. But if you're just talking about the cardinal direction, go 200 miles south and you'll see it, you don't capitalize the S in South because you're just talking about the direction. All right, in titles of publications, capitalize the first and last words plus other words within titles, including is, are, and be. You also capitalize the really important words. You don't capitalize a, an, the, but, as, if, and, or, nor, or any prepositions unless they're the first or last word. So, for example, Night of the Living Dead. Well, night is the first word. It's also a very important word in the title of that movie, as are living and dead, but of and the aren't that important, so we usually don't capitalize them. But in A Tale of Two Cities, we do capitalize the A because it's the first word. Tale is important, two cities is important, of, not all that important, so, and it's in the middle of the title, so we don't capitalize it. If you look at the TV show My Name is Earl, we capitalize my because it's the first word, name and Earl because they're important, and is because it's the main verb, and it tends to be far more important than its length would suggest. Now, the reason you do this is because the more letters you capitalize in anything, especially a title, the more slowly somebody reads. They don't even realize that they're slowing down, but capital letters do slow down the I. So if every single word is capitalized, it makes it very choppy, very hard to read, and eventually somebody will quit reading whatever you've written just because it's so irritating. If you don't believe me, go read some 19th century newspapers where they capitalize random words in the headlines and sometimes in the text, and just see how long it takes you. Next, capitalize the words federal or state when they are used as part of an official agency name or in government documents where those terms represent an official name. So, I wrote to the State Board of Equalization. Well, state is part of the name of the organization, so it's capitalized. It's a proper noun. But if you're just talking about state as an adjective, for example, my business complies with all state laws, well, you don't capitalize state in that case because you're not talking about a proper noun. You're just talking about government in general. All right, next. Don't capitalize the names of seasons unless they're part of proper nouns. So if I say, I love summer weather, you don't capitalize summer because it's not a proper noun. It doesn't need capitalization. However, if you say, my favorite actress is Summer Glau, well, Summer happens to be her first name. So it's a proper noun, so you capitalize the S. Next, capitalize the first word of a salutation, a greeting, and the first word of a complimentary close. So, when we say, Dear Mr. Lee, even though dear is not normally a word we capitalize, it's the first word of the greeting, so we capitalize it. Similarly, when you sign your letter, you say, Very sincerely yours, you capitalize the V in very, but you don't need to capitalize sincerely or yours because they're not the first word. Next, capitalize words derived from proper nouns. So, we say, my favorite subjects are English and math. Why do we capitalize the E in English, but not the M in math? Because English comes from England, which is the name of a country, which is a proper noun, so you capitalize English. There is no math land or country of math, so math is not derived from a proper noun, so we don't capitalize it unless it's the first word of the sentence or in some way follows one of these other rules. Next, capitalize names of specific course titles. You treat them almost like you would book titles. So in this case, we say, I'm taking English 101 and Algebra 200. We wouldn't normally capitalize the A in algebra, but because it's the specific name of a course, we capitalize it. All right. After a sentence ending with a colon, do not capitalize the first word if it begins a list. So check the lesson on colons if you're confused about this, but here's how it works. These are my favorite foods: watermelon, boysenberries, and chocolate cake. So we have a complete sentence here, these are my favorite foods, then we have a colon, but what follows it is not a complete sentence of its own, it's just a list, so we don't capitalize the W in watermelon. Similarly, do not capitalize when only one sentence follows a sentence ending with a colon. So if we say, I love Spider Robinson's writing, colon, his collection of essays, The Crazy Years, is hilarious, we don't need to capitalize the H in his because there's only one sentence following the colon to clarify what I just said. However, when two or more sentences follow a sentence ending with a colon, two or more sentences that clarify that first sentence and add meaning to it, then you do capitalize the first letter of each of those sentences. I love Spider Robinson's writing, colon, capital H, his collection of essays, The Crazy Years, is hilarious. Also, we're going on the same subject, Callahan's Cross-Time Saloon is a delight. So it's another book by the same author. I'm still talking about the same subject, so I've really got two sentences following this colon, so I capitalize the first letter of each. Because otherwise you just stop using capital letters altogether and it's terrible. All right. Now that we've gone through all of those rules of capitalization, let's do a little bit of practice. We have a short letter here, which may or may not make a lot of sense, especially because it's missing most of its capital letters. So, read through this and tell me if you can find any of the capital letters that are supposed to be in here, or better yet, all of the capital letters that are supposed to be in here. Let's read, shall we? Dear Ms. King, I will never forget the first time I read one of your books set in San Francisco. I was living in South Carolina at the time near the western border. I love the scene where your heroine met the president. You will be interested to hear that President Kennedy was always one of my heroes. I also liked how you wrote about the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You write about so many interesting subjects. Egyptian hieroglyphics, computer programming, and Latin literature are only a few of your fields of interest. I will be reading your next novel in my Literature 204 class at the University of Southern California. Yours sincerely, and we've left the signature off. Take a good look, read through it a couple of times if you need to, see if you can find which words should be capitalized but aren't. You ready? Let's look at the answers. All right, we capitalize the D in Dear Miss King because it's the first word of a salutation. I will never forget the first time I read one of your books set in San Francisco. It's the name of a city, it's a proper noun, so you capitalize the S and the F. I was living in South Carolina at the time, another proper noun, near the western border. You notice we don't capitalize the W in western because we're not referring to a specific region known as the West. There actually is a part of the United States normally called the West. There's a part of planet Earth normally called the West, capitalized. But if we're just talking about the border of the state of South Carolina that happens to be westernmost, it's not a special place. It doesn't have the special name, the West of South Carolina, so we don't capitalize it. I, well, pronoun I is always capitalized, right? Love the scene where your heroine met the president. We don't capitalize president here because we're using it in place of the name just to refer to the office. However, next sentence, you will be interested to hear that President Kennedy was always one of my heroes. Now we're talking about a specific individual and we're putting the title in front of his name. So we capitalize both the P in president and the K in Kennedy. I was also fascinated by the way you wrote about the Federal Bureau of, this should also be capitalized, investigation. So we capitalize all three of those words because it's the name of an official government agency. Moving on, you write about so many interesting subjects. Egyptian hieroglyphics, that's derived from the proper noun Egypt, the name of a country. Computer programming, nothing is capitalized in that particular subject because it's not derived from a proper noun. And Latin literature, that's derived from the Latin language, which is a proper noun. These are only a few of your fields of interest. I will be reading your next novel in my Literature 204 class. It's the name of a specific course, so we capitalize it, at the University of Southern California. Proper noun, name of a university, so we capitalize each of the major words, but we don't really bother with of because we practically never capitalize of. Finally, yours sincerely, first letter of the ending salutation, the complimentary close, you capitalize the first letter. And that's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching. Educator.com.